Picture this. You wake up. It is dark. Not the kind of dark where the curtains are just doing their job. The kind of dark where the sun will not rise for another 4 hours, and when it does, it will be weak, pale, and gone again before late afternoon. The temperature outside the shelter is somewhere between brutal and catastrophic. The wind is doing that thing where it finds every possible gap in the hides you've stretched over the frame of your dwelling and sends frozen fingers of air directly at your face. You have no coffee, you have no alarm clock, no phone to scroll through, no central heating humming reassuringly in the background. What you have is a fire that needs feeding immediately, or everyone in the shelter is going to have a very bad morning. You have 2 children who are about to wake up hungry. You have a group of people counting on today going, well, because yesterday's food is almost gone. And the mammoth steppe outside is not a place that rewards hesitation or poor planning. This is a Tuesday in the Ice Age, and the day is already starting. Most people, when they imagine Ice Age life, picture one of 2 things. Either the dramatic stuff, the mammoth hunt, the cave painting, the desperate survival moment, or they picture long, boring stretches of nothing. Ancient humans sitting around staring at walls, waiting for something to happen. Both images are wrong. The reality of what ancient humans did all day during the Ice Age is something far more layered, far more human, and in many ways far more interesting than either extreme. It was a life built entirely around the management of time, energy, and resources in one of the most demanding environments our species has ever inhabited. Every hour had a purpose. Every task connected to something else. And the texture of those days, what people actually did from the moment they woke up to the moment they collapsed back into sleep, tells us more about who ancient humans were than almost anything else in the archaeological record. So walk through it. A full day. What actually happened? The first thing that happened every single morning without exception was fire management. Fire during the Ice Age was not a luxury, not a comfort feature, not something you lit when the mood struck. It was the central operating system of the entire camp. Fire provided warmth in temperatures that could kill an unprotected adult in hours. It cooked food, which dramatically expanded the range of things that were edible and the caloric value extracted from what was eaten. It hardened wooden tools, drove moisture from hides, kept predators at a cautious distance, and provided light during the enormous stretches of winter darkness. Losing the fire was a genuine crisis. Keeping it going was a daily responsibility that fell to specific members of the group and required consistent attention throughout the day and night. Fuel had to be gathered. In a landscape where trees were sparse, the Ice Age mammoth steppe was largely open grassland, not forest. Fuel sources included dried animal dung, bone, and whatever woody scrub or driftwood was available. Bone, interestingly, burns extremely well once it gets going, and ancient groups living in areas with limited wood appear to have relied on it heavily as fuel. The logistics of keeping a fire burning through an Ice Age winter required forward planning. Fuel had to be stockpiled, managed, and used efficiently rather than burned through recklessly. The person tending the fire wasn't just performing a menial chore, they were managing the most critical infrastructure the group possessed. While fire management was underway, food preparation began. Breakfast in the Ice Age was not a separate meal category with its own cultural ritual the way it is today. Eating happened when food was available and when the work of preparing it could be fit into the day's schedule. Meat, the dietary cornerstone of Ice Age life in cold northern environments, was either freshly obtained or stored, and stored meat required preparation before consumption. Frozen meat had to be thawed. Dried meat had to be rehydrated or simply chewed, which for tough dried protein required significant jaw effort over extended time. Bone was cracked for marrow, which was nutritionally dense and calorically important in a diet that needed to deliver enough energy to keep bodies warm in extreme cold. Cooking techniques were more varied than people tend to assume. Roasting directly over flame, stone boiling, heating rocks in a fire, and dropping them into liquid-filled containers to bring the liquid to a boil, and pit cooking using heated stones buried in the ground were all within the technical repertoire of Ice Age people. These weren't simple or fast processes. Preparing a proper meal for a group of 20 people using these methods was a time-consuming, skill-intensive operation that required knowledge, attention, and coordination between multiple people working simultaneously. And while food was being prepared and fire was being tended, the day's core work was already being assessed and assigned. Ancient Ice Age groups operated as intensely cooperative economic units. Survival required that every capable person was contributing meaningfully, and the organization of who did what on any given day was shaped by weather, available resources, the group's current food and supply situation, and the specific skills of individuals within the group. For the hunters, mornings often began with reading the environment. Tracks in snow, wind direction, sounds carried across the open steppe. All of these were data that shaped decisions about where to go and what strategy to employ. Ice Age hunting was not a matter of grabbing a spear and running at the nearest large animal. Large animals during the Ice Age were enormous, dangerous, and very capable of killing the people trying to kill them. A woolly mammoth was not a creature anyone approached casually. Woolly rhinoceroses were aggressive and heavily armored. Even reindeer in a panicked herd were capable of trampling hunters who misjudged the terrain or their own positioning. Successful large-game hunting required strategy developed in advance. Knowledge of specific animal behavioral patterns, coordination between multiple hunters with clearly understood roles, and the patience to wait for the right conditions rather than forcing a dangerous confrontation. Much of what looked like doing nothing, hunters standing quietly, observing, reading the landscape, was actually active information gathering that made the difference between a hunt that ended in food and one that ended in injury or death. The planning conversation that happened around the fire before a hunt, the assessment of conditions, the assignment of positions, this was not idle chatter. It was operational planning for one of the most physically dangerous activities in ancient life. When hunting was not the primary activity of the day, and there were many days, particularly in deep winter, when going out to hunt was not viable, the work shifted to what archaeologists sometimes call maintenance activities, which is a slightly sterile term for what was actually a dense, skilled, and endlessly demanding set of tasks that kept the group functional. Hide working was one of the most labor-intensive and technically demanding of these. An animal skin fresh from a kill is not clothing or shelter material. It is a raw biological product that will rot if not processed quickly and correctly, that is heavy, stiff, and nearly useless in its unworked state. Converting a raw hide into usable leather or fur involved scraping away fat and tissue from the inner surface, stretching the hide repeatedly while it dried, working it physically, kneading, pulling, folding to break down the fibers and create flexibility, and treating it with materials like animal brain or fat to prevent stiffening. This process took hours of sustained physical effort for a single hide, and a group needed many hides for clothing, for shelter covering, for sleeping surfaces, for bags and containers. Hide working was never finished. It was an ongoing, daily presence in camp life, typically performed by women while simultaneously managing children, overseeing food preparation, and conducting other tasks. The clothing produced from this process was not simple. The presence of bone needles at Ice Age sites, needles fine enough to thread sinew as thin as modern thread, indicates the production of tailored, multi-piece garments with fitted components. Surviving an Ice Age winter wearing poorly constructed clothing was not possible. A garment that let wind through, that failed to trap body heat effectively, that left gaps at the wrists or neck, was not a fashion problem. It was a survival problem. The people making Ice Age clothing understood insulation, fit, and layering in ways that were sophisticated and practical, and the production of a complete cold weather outfit, trousers, upper garment, footwear, headgear, mittens, required significant time and skill spread across multiple days of work. Tool production and maintenance ran parallel to all of this. Flint tools dulled with use and broke with the physical demands placed on them. Producing a new tool from raw flint, napping a sharp functional point or blade from a raw nodule was a skilled craft requiring years of practice to perform well. The waste debris from flint napping found at Ice Age sites shows that this was happening constantly, embedded in the daily rhythm of camp life rather than being a special occasional activity. Spear shafts needed to be straightened, dried, and seasoned. Hafting, attaching stone points to wooden or bone shafts using sinew and plant resin, required careful preparation of adhesive materials and precise execution. Bone tools needed to be carved, smoothed, and shaped. The toolkits of Ice Age people were extensive, sophisticated, and required regular attention to keep functional. For children, the day had its own rhythm that was structured around learning disguised as play and participation. Ancient children did not have a separate childhood domain of activities divorced from adult work. They were embedded in it from early ages, watching, imitating, practicing scaled-down versions of adult skills, and being gradually incorporated into real tasks as their capability grew. A 6-year-old might be responsible for gathering specific plant materials or keeping a watchful eye on a younger sibling while adults worked nearby. A 10-year-old might be practicing flint napping on small pieces of stone, producing imperfect results that were nonetheless real attempts at a real skill. Adolescents were active participants in most adult work, including hunting for boys and hide processing and food preparation for girls. With the specific gendered division, varying between different ancient groups and environments. This learning through doing model was the only educational system available, and it was extraordinarily effective at producing capable adults. By the time an Ice Age young person reached physical maturity, they had spent their entire childhood in direct apprenticeship to the full range of skills their survival required. They hadn't studied hunting. They had hunted, first in small ways, then in larger ones, accumulating real experience under the guidance of more experienced group members. This kind of embodied experiential learning produced a competence level that is striking. Ice Age people were masters of their environment in ways that would leave most modern humans completely helpless. By the way, if you want to go even deeper into the secret lives of ancient humans, I just launched a full course called The Secret Lives of Ancient Humans. 10 modules, 3+ hours of content, covering everything we never talk about on YouTube. What they feared, how they communicated, what hunted them, and much more. Plus an exclusive PDF guide included. Link in the description. See you inside. Now here's the part of the daily schedule that tends to get overlooked entirely in popular accounts of Ice Age life. The middle of the day, particularly in winter, often had a quality of enforced slowness that created space for activities that were not strictly survival-oriented. When weather made outdoor activity dangerous or unproductive, when food stores were adequate for the immediate moment, when the most urgent tasks of the morning had been completed, ancient groups had time that was not consumed by crisis management. This time was not wasted. Social grooming, the physical and verbal maintenance of relationships within the group, was a constant background activity throughout the day, embedded in every shared task and every moment of proximity. But dedicated social time, when people sat together without an immediate task demanding their hands, was when the deeper work of group cohesion happened. Stories were told, and this cannot be emphasized enough because storytelling in a world without writing was not entertainment in the trivial sense we sometimes mean. It was the primary technology for knowledge transmission, cultural maintenance, and collective identity. The story of where the group came from, who their ancestors were, what the landscape meant, and how to read it. What had happened in previous crises and how those crises had been survived. All of this lived in stories, told and retold, refined over generations, kept alive in the mouths of the people who needed it. Music was present. The evidence for Ice Age musical instruments, bone flutes found at sites across Europe, some among the oldest manufactured musical objects ever discovered, confirms that sound making was part of daily or regular life. What music meant to Ice Age people, exactly what purposes it served, how it was integrated into daily routine versus special occasions, these questions cannot be fully answered. But the presence of carefully crafted instruments tells us that music was valued enough to invest significant time in producing the means to make it. People who spend hours carving a flute from a bird bone are not doing so casually. Artwork and decoration were also present in daily life in ways that extended beyond the famous cave paintings. Personal ornamentation, perforated animal teeth, carved beads made from ivory or shell, pendants, and pigment applied to skin or clothing, appears consistently in the Ice Age record. These were not objects produced once and forgotten. They were worn, repaired, traded, and accumulated over time. The making of them, the patient drilling of a hole through a fox tooth, the carving of a small ivory pendant into an animal form, was a craft activity that happened during the available hours of a day, alongside everything else. Body maintenance had its own daily presence. Grooming, the removal of parasites, the management of hair, the care of wounds and injuries was a continuous social activity that served both hygienic and bonding purposes. Wound care in a world without antiseptics or medical intervention required knowledge of plant materials with antimicrobial or healing properties, the skill to apply them effectively, and the attentiveness to monitor injuries for the signs of infection that could kill in a world with no pharmaceutical backup. The people in a group who held this knowledge, typically experienced older women, were providing a medical service that was genuinely life-saving and doing so within the texture of ordinary daily life, rather than in any specialized medical context. As afternoon shortened toward the early darkness of an Ice Age winter day, activity patterns shifted toward consolidation. Food for the evening was prepared. Fire was built up against the coming night. Tools were set aside or put away. Hides being worked were secured. Children were gathered in. The group contracted physically, drawing closer to the fire and to each other as the temperature dropped and the darkness settled. Evening around the fire was not simply the end of the day. It was arguably the most socially important part of it. Firelight in darkness creates a specific kind of intimacy, a bounded circle of warmth and visibility in an otherwise cold, dark, potentially dangerous world, and ancient people used that intimacy in recognizable ways. This was when the most important social processing of the day happened. Conflicts that had simmered during the day's work were addressed or managed. Plans for the following day were made. Knowledge was shared. The older members of the group, whose primary contribution was increasingly the wisdom and social memory they carried, were most fully engaged in the evening hours, when experience and storytelling mattered more than physical capacity. Sleep itself was not the monolithic 8-hour block that modern people treat as the biological default. Evidence from studies of people living without artificial light suggests that ancient sleep was likely biphasic. A first sleep period of several hours, a period of waking in the middle of the night lasting an hour or more, and then a second sleep period until morning. The waking period in the middle of the night was not insomnia. It was normal, expected, and used. For tending the fire, for quiet conversation, for the kind of reflective mental processing that the darkness and stillness made possible. The concept of lying awake in the middle of the night as a medical problem is a modern one. For ancient people, it was simply part of the rhythm. Watch duty also happened through the night. In a world where large predators, cave lions, cave hyenas, wolves, bears were real and present threats, a group sleeping without any waking watch was a group taking a risk that natural selection would eventually punish. Rotating watch through the night, with individuals taking turns maintaining alertness while others slept, was almost certainly a standard practice in ancient camps. The person on watch was not idle. They were tending fire, listening, processing the sounds of the night, performing a function that was as important as anything that happened during the day. And then, morning came again. The fire needed feeding. The children woke hungry. The hunters assessed the conditions. The hide workers picked up where they had left off. The day began again, connected to the one before it and the one after it in an unbroken chain of purposeful, skilled, relentless activity that kept 20 or 30 people alive in one of the most challenging environments our species has ever inhabited. Here is the thing that this daily picture makes undeniable. Ice Age people were not struggling to fill their time. They were struggling to find enough of it. Every skill they possessed had taken years to acquire. Every task they performed connected to a web of other tasks. Every hour was accountable to the group's survival in ways that were direct, immediate, and visible. There was no separation between work and life, between productive activity and social existence, between survival and meaning. It was all one thing. The making of a tool was also the expression of a craft tradition passed down through generations. The telling of a story around the fire was also the maintenance of ecological knowledge that might save someone's life next season. The grooming of a child was also the reinforcement of a social bond that the group depended on. This is what ancient humans did all day during the Ice Age. Not nothing, not just drama, everything, constantly, together, in a world that demanded their full attention and got it. And the proof that they pulled it off, day after day, winter after winter, for tens of thousands of years, is the fact that you are here watching this, descended from every single one of them.